A biker and his 9-year-old daughter set out across the Arizona desert. A father chasing redemption. A little girl clutching hope. By nightfall, both were gone without a trace. The police found his Harley parked beside a canyon trail, one helmet resting neatly under a juniper tree, as if he planned to come back. For 33 years, the Red Rocks kept their silence, until the daughter walked into a sheriff's office, barefoot, claiming to be the child who vanished. But she didn't return alone. What she remembered about those missing years would unravel the darkest secret the desert ever buried. The July sun hung mercilessly over Arizona State Route 89A as Ray Larkin's Harley-Davidson rumbled through Oak Creek Canyon. His 9-year-old daughter Maya pressed against his back, her small arms wrapped tightly around his waist, her pink helmet resting between his shoulder blades. The leather of his vest was hot to the touch, but the wind whipping through the canyon provided brief moments of relief from the 95-degree heat. They'd left Sedona behind 2 hours ago, taking the scenic route south toward Tucson. Ray had chosen the longer path deliberately, wanting to give Maya time to adjust to their new reality. The custody papers, finally signed yesterday, felt like a weight lifted from his shoulders after 18 months of legal battles. The Welcome to Oak Creek Vista sign appeared ahead, and Ray felt Maya tap twice on his side. Their signal for a rest stop. He'd taught her that back when she first started riding with him, making sure she could always let him know when she needed a break. The Harley's engine growled as he downshifted, turning into the gravel lot of the Pinecone Diner, a weathered building with a rusted metal sign that had probably been there since the 60s. "My legs are all pins and needles, Daddy," Maya announced as she climbed off the bike, her brown pigtails mussed from the helmet. She was wearing her favorite jean jacket despite the heat, the one with the rainbow patches she'd picked out herself. Ray smiled, watching her hop from foot to foot in her red sneakers. "Take a little walk around, Princess. We could both use some real food anyway." He ran a hand through his graying beard, feeling the sweat that had collected there during the ride. The diner's screen door creaked as they entered, a bell jingling overhead. The cool blast of air conditioning hit them immediately, and Ray noticed Maya's shoulders relax. Inside, the place was exactly what you'd expect. Vinyl booths worn smooth by decades of travelers, a counter with chrome-edged stools, and the smell of coffee and grilled onions hanging in the air. "Sit anywhere you like," called a waitress from behind the counter. Her name tag read Dorothy, and she had the efficient movements of someone who'd been serving truckers and tourists for years. They slid into a booth by the window, where Ray could keep an eye on his Harley. Maya immediately grabbed the paper placemat and the small cup of crayons, starting to connect the dots of a cowboy riding a horse. Dorothy appeared with menus and water glasses. "Y'all look like you could use something cold. We've got fresh lemonade today." "Two, please," Ray said, watching Maya's face light up at the mention of lemonade. "And we'll start with some fries." While they waited, Ray pulled out the folded map from his vest pocket, spreading it across the table. "See here, Maya Bear? We're right about here." His calloused finger traced their route. "And Aunt Sarah's place is down here in Tucson. We'll stop in Camp Verde for the night, then finish the ride tomorrow when it's cooler." Maya nodded, but her attention was drawn to a rack of postcards near the register. "Can I send one to Mom?" she asked quietly, testing the waters. Ray felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Helen's face flashed in his mind. Not the recent court appearances where she'd been hollow-eyed and aggressive, but the woman he'd married 12 years ago, before the meth and the desert prophets had taken her away piece by piece. "Sure, baby, pick one out while I order our food." He watched her skip to the postcard rack, her red sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. Through the window, Ray noticed a blue pickup truck pulling into the lot, Arizona dust coating its Texas plates. 2 men inside, but they stayed in their cab, engine idling. Probably just checking directions. But something about their stillness made Ray's combat-trained instincts twitch. Dorothy returned with their lemonade and a heap of golden fries. Maya slid back into the booth, clutching a postcard showing the red rocks of Sedona at sunset. "Look, it's like where we used to live," she said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "It sure is. We can write it after lunch. Ray took a long drink of lemonade, letting the cold sweetness wash away his unease. How about a burger to go with those fries? Maya nodded enthusiastically, her mouth full of potatoes. A drop of ketchup landed on her jean jacket, and she quickly dabbed at it with a napkin, serious as a surgeon. They spent the next hour in that booth, sharing a plate of fries and trading stories. Maya told him about the book she was reading, something about a girl who could talk to horses, while Ray shared sanitized versions of his long-haul trucking adventures from before she was born. He carefully avoided any mentions of Vietnam or the rougher years that followed. When Dorothy brought their check, Ray noticed the blue pickup was still there, now parked at the far end of the lot. One man remained in the cab, the other nowhere in sight. Ray's hand instinctively touched the knife clipped inside his boot, an old habit from his military days. "Ready to hit the road, Princess?" He kept his voice casual, not wanting to alarm Maya. "Can we mail the postcard first?" She had carefully printed Helen's latest known address on it, some compound outside Sedona where her mother's new family lived. "There's a post office in Camp Verde. We'll stop there first thing." Ray left cash on the table with a generous tip, then guided Maya toward the door with a hand on her shoulder. The heat hit them like a physical wall as they stepped outside. Ray scanned the lot quickly. The second man from the pickup was now at the gas pump, his back turned. Something about his posture seemed off, too rigid for the casual act he was putting on. "Helmet time," Ray announced, helping Maya secure hers before putting on his own. He did a quick walk-around of the Harley, checking the tires and bags out of habit. The engine roared to life, and Ray felt Maya's arms wrap around him again, her grip a little tighter than usual. Maybe she had sensed his tension, or maybe it was just the heat making everyone edgy. He eased the bike onto 89A, watching in his mirrors as the blue pickup pulled out a few minutes later. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the canyon as they rode south. Red cliff walls rose on either side, and the air was filled with the scent of sun-baked pine needles. Ray kept checking his mirrors, but the pickup had turned off somewhere back near the diner. They passed a sign for Jerome, and Maya tapped his side twice. Ray nodded, knowing she probably needed another break from the heat. Just a few more miles to Camp Verde, he thought. They'd get a room with air conditioning, send that postcard, and tomorrow they'd be in Tucson with Sarah starting fresh. The next roadside pullout appeared around a bend, a small gravel area near a hiking trail. Ray slowed the Harley, guiding it carefully off the highway. The spot was deserted, with only a weathered trail marker and a juniper tree providing shade. "Quick break," he called over his shoulder as they came to a stop. "Drink some water, stretch your legs, then we'll make that final push to Camp Verde." Maya was already off the bike, pulling a water bottle from the saddlebag. She took off her helmet, her face flushed from the heat. Ray dismounted more slowly, his joints stiff from the ride. He removed his own helmet, placing it carefully beneath the juniper tree to keep it out of the direct sun. The canyon was quiet, except for the occasional cry of a hawk riding the thermals high above. A pebble clattered down the cliff face behind them. Ray turned sharply, his hand moving toward his boot knife. This section ends here as per the prompt, showing Ray and Maya's last known stop, including the detail about the helmet being placed under the tree. The scene captures their relationship, establishes the background of their situation, and builds tension while maintaining the specific details required in the prompt. Sheriff Tom Hallett stood at the edge of the pullout, studying the ground where Ray Larkin's Harley had last been seen. The morning sun was already brutal, turning the red rocks into a shimmering furnace. 3 days had passed since the motorcycle was found, and time was working against them. "Found another print here, Sheriff," Deputy Martinez called from near the juniper tree. "Same pattern as the others, child's size, heading toward the trail." Hallett limped over, his bad knee protesting. The print was clear in the packed dirt, the distinctive waffle pattern of a kid's sneaker. Maya's shoe had been found 50 yards up that same trail, sitting on a rock like it had been placed there deliberately. "Mark it and photograph it," Hallett ordered, watching as Martinez placed a yellow evidence marker beside the print. The scene was starting to look like a connect-the-dots puzzle. Yellow, markers creating a path that led nowhere. The search command post had been set up in the pullout's gravel lot. Maps were spread across the hood of Hallett's cruiser, the paper curling in the heat. Red pins marked where evidence had been found. The helmet under the tree, the shoe on the trail, scattered motorcycle gear that seemed to have been dropped at regular intervals. "Sheriff!" a voice crackled over the radio. "Got the first helicopter incoming. Arizona DPS is sending 2 more birds from Phoenix." Hallett keyed his mic. "Copy that. Have them start with grid pattern alpha, working east from the highway." The sound of rotor blades grew louder as the helicopter appeared over the canyon rim. The downdraft kicked up clouds of red dust, forcing the ground teams to shield their eyes. By mid-morning, the pullout was crowded with vehicles. 24 volunteers from Sedona's search and rescue team had arrived, along with handlers from Arizona Search Dog Association. The dogs were already working the perimeter, noses to the ground as they traced invisible trails. "What have we got?" Hallett asked the lead handler, a weathered woman named Grace, who'd been doing this work for 20 years. "Dogs are picking up scents, but they're scattered," she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "It's like someone deliberately laid false trails. They'll follow one for 50 yards, then it just stops." Hallett nodded grimly. He'd seen this before. Someone taking time to obscure their tracks. This wasn't a simple case of a father running off with his kid. The scene was too carefully arranged. The radio crackled again. "Sheriff, we've got movement in Sector 4. Search team found some disturbed brush about half a mile down the wash. On my way." Hallett grabbed his canteen and started down the trail, Martinez falling in beside him. The wash was a natural drainage channel, cutting through the red rock like a scar. Flash floods had scoured the walls smooth, leaving behind deposits of sand and debris. The search team was waiting at a bend in the wash. Their yellow vests stood out against the rust-colored stone as they pointed to a section of brush that had been broken and trampled. "Looks fresh," the team leader said. "And there's this." He held up a small plastic bottle, the kind that would hold apple juice. The label was sun-bleached, but still readable. Hallett took the bottle, turning it over in his hands. The cap was still sealed, the contents long evaporated in the desert heat. A child's bottle, the kind a parent would pack for a long motorcycle ride. "Bag it," he ordered, handing it to Martinez. "And get the dogs down here. Maybe we can—" He was cut off by sudden shouts from above. One of the helicopters had dropped lower over the wash, the pilot gesturing urgently. The radio erupted with voices. "Multiple heat signatures in the caves, quarter-mile east of your position." The search teams moved quickly, following the wash as it curved through the canyon. The helicopter stayed overhead, guiding them toward a series of small caves cut into the cliff face. The first cave was empty except for recent garbage, beer cans and food wrappers left by hikers. The second contained only darkness and the musty smell of bat guano. But the third— "Sheriff!" Martinez's voice echoed from inside. "We've got something." The cave opening was narrow, forcing Hallett to turn sideways to enter. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in crude drawings. Recent drawings, made with charcoal and red ochre. Martinez stood at the back of the cave, his light focused on a small alcove. There, arranged with deliberate care, was a child's backpack. Pink, with cartoon horses on the fabric. Maya's backpack, the one she'd been carrying on the bike. "Empty," Martinez reported, carefully lifting the bag. "But look at this." He pointed to marks in the dust around the alcove. "Someone's been here recently. Multiple someones, judging by the footprints." Hallett studied the ground. Large boots had left clear impressions, alongside smaller prints that could have been Maya's. But there were other prints too. At least 2 more adults, their tracks overlapping in the soft dirt. The radio buzzed. "Sheriff, DPS chopper has multiple vehicles approaching your location. Sedona PD, FBI, and—" "Hold on. We've got media trucks coming up the highway." Hallett swore under his breath. He'd hoped to keep this quiet a little longer, but news traveled fast in small towns. especially news about missing children. The cave became crowded as more searchers arrived. Crime scene technicians began photographing everything, their flashes creating stark shadows on the ancient walls. The dogs were brought in, but the overlapping scents in the confined space left them confused and whining. By late afternoon, the temperature had climbed past 100 degrees. The search teams were exhausted, their water supplies running low. Hallett stood at the cave entrance, watching as reporters gathered at the pullout below. Their cameras glinted in the sun like predatory eyes. "Sheriff?" Martinez appeared at his elbow. "Just got word from the station. Helen Larkin, the ex-wife, she's making statements to the press, saying Ray planned this, that he's taken Maya to keep her from visiting the compound." Hallett shook his head. "No, this isn't a custody snatch. Look at how everything's laid out. The helmet, the shoe, this backpack. Someone wants us to follow these breadcrumbs. But where do they lead?" Before Hallett could answer, a commotion erupted below. The dogs had caught a new scent, leading their handlers toward a narrow side canyon. Searchers converged on the area, their voices echoing off the cliff walls. The side canyon was little more than a crack in the earth, its entrance almost hidden by scrub brush. The dogs grew more excited as they entered, pulling hard at their leashes. 50 yards in, the canyon opened slightly. Here, caught in a tangle of dead branches, was Maya's apple juice bottle. The plastic was scraped and dirty, but like the backpack, it seemed to have been placed rather than dropped. Hallett picked up the bottle carefully, noting how it had been wedged into the branches. This wasn't random debris washed down by a flood. Someone had put it here, another piece in their twisted trail. The dogs whined and pawed at the ground, but the scent ended there. The canyon walls rose sheer and smooth, offering no path forward. Behind them, the sun was setting, turning the red rocks to blood. Martinez voiced what everyone was thinking. "They're gone, aren't they?" Hallett didn't answer. He looked at the bottle in his hand, then at the gathering darkness above. Somewhere out there, a father and daughter had vanished into the vastness of the Arizona wilderness. But the evidence told a darker story, one of planning, of multiple participants, of a crime that had been choreographed like a deadly dance. The radio crackled one final time. "Sheriff, we're losing daylight. Do we continue the search?" Hallett keyed his mic, his voice heavy with the weight of what they hadn't found. "Get the lights set up. We keep looking until we find them." But as the first stars appeared over the canyon, he knew the desert had already claimed its secrets. The real question wasn't where Ray and Maya had gone. It was who had taken them there. The scene ends here with the discovery of the apple juice bottle and the growing realization that hope is fading, exactly as specified in the prompt. The narrative maintains focus on the search efforts and builds tension through the discovery of carefully placed evidence, while avoiding any resolution or foreshadowing of future events. The August sun beat down mercilessly on the sheriff's office in downtown Sedona. Inside, Sheriff Tom Hallett sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of search reports and witness statements. Coffee rings stained the manila folders, evidence of too many late nights poring over the same details. A fan whirred uselessly in the corner, pushing hot air around the cramped office. On the wall, a large map of the Red Rock Wilderness was dotted with colored pins marking every location they'd searched. 3 weeks of intensive efforts, and still nothing concrete to show for it. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. Deputy Martinez entered, holding the morning's Sedona Red Rock News. "You're gonna want to see this, Sheriff." The headline jumped off the page. "Mother claims motorcycle disappearance a hoax." Below it, a photo showed Helen Larkin, Ray's ex-wife, standing outside what appeared to be a compound-style settlement near Sedona. Hallett scanned the article, his jaw tightening. Helen claimed Ray had orchestrated the whole thing, using his biker connections to spirit Maya away. She painted a picture of a vindictive ex-husband who couldn't stand losing partial custody in their latest court battle. "This is going to make things harder," Martinez said, leaning against the filing cabinet. "Already has." Hallett tossed the paper aside. Got 3 calls this morning from people claiming they saw Ray and Maya in New Mexico. Another swears they're in Mexico. Everyone's got a theory now. The phone rang, and Hallett grabbed it before the first ring ended. Sheriff's office. Tom? The voice belonged to Sarah Larkin, Ray's sister. I just saw the paper. You can't possibly believe what Helen's saying. Sarah, my brother would never abandon his daughter. Never. He fought too hard to get her back. Hallett rubbed his temples. Sarah had been calling daily, sometimes multiple times, since the disappearance. Her dedication was admirable, but it was wearing him down. We're following every lead, Sarah, but without new evidence. Then find some. That's your job, isn't it? Her voice cracked. Ray's motorcycle didn't just drive itself into that canyon. Someone took them. After he hung up, Hallett stared at the incident board. Photos of Ray and Maya smiled back at him. Ray in his leather vest. Maya holding up a science fair ribbon. Between them, images of the crime scene. The carefully placed helmet, the single shoe, the backpack in the cave. Martinez cleared his throat. Meeting starting, Sheriff. Everyone's waiting. The conference room was packed with local law enforcement, state police, and 2 FBI agents who'd been called in after the first week. The air of frustration was palpable. Agent Wilson, a sharp-featured woman in a crisp suit, stood at the whiteboard. Let's review what we know. 3 weeks ago, Ray and Maya Larkin were last seen at the Gas and Go on Highway 89A. Surveillance shows them heading south toward Oak Creek Canyon. The motorcycle was found here. She pointed to a mark on the map. With no signs of collision or struggle. Because there wasn't one, interrupted Detective Rogers from Sedona PD. Look, we all want to believe something happened to them, but the evidence doesn't support it. No blood, no drag marks, no shell casings. Everything was placed just so. This has staging written all over it. You think Ray Larkin killed his own daughter? Martinez demanded. I think we need to consider all possibilities, Rogers shot back. The man was a Vietnam vet with PTSD. He'd just gone through a brutal custody battle. Maybe something snapped. Hallett slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. I knew Ray Larkin. He was rough around the edges, sure, but he loved that girl more than anything. With all due respect, Sheriff, Agent Wilson said, personal feelings can't factor into this investigation. The mother's statement raises valid questions about Ray's state of mind. The meeting deteriorated from there. Half the room supported the theory that Ray had engineered the disappearance, citing Helen's claims about his supposedly violent past. The other half insisted on foul play, pointing to the suspicious truck seen following them. By the end, nothing was resolved. The FBI announced they were scaling back their involvement, citing lack of evidence of interstate trafficking. State police would continue limited aerial surveys, but the ground search was officially ending. After everyone filed out, Hallett stood alone in the conference room. The wall of photos seemed to mock him. Every lead followed, every canyon searched, every witness interviewed. All leading nowhere. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Sarah Larkin's here. Says she won't leave until she talks to you. Hallett found Sarah in the lobby, clutching a folder of her own. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, suggesting sleepless nights matching his own. They're giving up, aren't they? She asked without preamble. Sarah, don't patronize me, Tom. I heard about the meeting. They think Ray did this? That he'd hurt Maya? She pulled out a stack of photos. Look at these. Really look. The pictures showed Ray and Maya together. At parks, birthday parties, school events. In every one, Ray watched his daughter with unmistakable devotion. The last photo showed them working on his Harley together. Maya perched on the seat while Ray showed her how to polish the chrome. The day before they disappeared, Sarah said softly, Ray called me. He was so excited about starting fresh in Tucson. He'd already enrolled Maya in school there, found an apartment near my place. He had plans. Her voice hardened. Whatever happened out there, my brother didn't plan it. Hallett couldn't meet her eyes. I know, Sarah, but without new evidence, there's only so much we can do. So that's it? You just stop looking? We never stop looking. But we have to be realistic about our resources. He gestured at the incident board. Every lead's been followed, every theory checked. The desert's been searched for miles in every direction. Sarah stood, gathering her photos with trembling hands. Maya's still out there somewhere. Maybe Ray is too. Toku. Don't let them become just another cold case, Tom. Please. After she left, Hallett walked outside. The sun was setting behind the red rocks, painting them in deep shadows. Somewhere in that vastness, a father and daughter had vanished without a trace. Or maybe, as some believed, they'd never been there at all. The next morning's paper announced the official end of the search operation. Local headlines moved on to other stories. The theories and accusations faded into whispered conversations at diners and gas stations. Fall came to the high desert. Tourists returned to photograph the changing colors. Hikers wandered the same trails where search teams had once combed every inch of ground. The red rocks stood silent, keeping their secrets. In his office, Sheriff Hallett added the Larkin case to a growing file of unsolved disappearances. But he kept their photo on his desk, Ray and Maya smiling from happier days, a reminder that sometimes the desert took more than just footprints in the sand. The case wasn't closed. Not really. But as winter approached and the days grew shorter, even Sarah's daily calls became less frequent. The mystery of what happened that summer day slowly faded into legend, joining other stories whispered around campfires about people who ventured into the wilderness and never returned. The red rocks watched, unchanging, as time moved on without answers. The scene ends here, having covered the stalling of the case, the mother's accusations, the sister's persistence, and the quiet ending of the official search, as specified in the prompt. The narrative maintains focus on the investigation's decline without revealing or suggesting future developments. October 1992 brought early frost to the high desert. Sarah Larkin's breath made small clouds in the dawn air as she climbed the familiar trail. Her weekly visits had become a ritual. Every Sunday, just as the sun crested the eastern ridges, she'd hike to the spot where Ray's motorcycle had been found. The juniper tree where they'd discovered his helmet still stood sentinel. Sarah touched its rough bark, remembering how Ray used to tease Maya about being tall enough to reach the lower branches. Now the tree had grown another few inches, marking time's passage without them. Below in the valley, Sedona was stirring to life. Tourist season was picking up again, the streets filling with camera-toting visitors eager to capture the fall colors. None of them knew this spot's significance. To them, it was just another scenic overlook. "I brought your favorite," Sarah whispered, setting down a paper bag. Inside was a peanut butter sandwich, the kind Ray always packed for their rides. She'd started leaving them here after the search ended, telling herself that somewhere, somehow, Ray would know. The wind picked up, rustling through the scrub brush. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter, scanning the horizon as she had countless times before. The canyon stretched endlessly, a maze of red stone and shadow. Somewhere in that vastness, her brother and niece had vanished. Back in town, life moved on. The Gas and Go, where Ray and Maya were last seen, had changed ownership. The missing persons posters, once plastered on every storefront, had weathered and peeled away. Even the local paper had stopped running updates on the case. Only the old-timers still talked about it, usually late at night at Joe's Bar and Grill. They'd swap theories over beer. Some said Ray had run off to Mexico. Others swore they'd seen mysterious lights in the canyon that night. The story was becoming legend, losing its sharp edges of reality. At the sheriff's station, the case file grew thinner as leads dried up. Deputies stopped checking the answering machine for tips. The incident board was cleared to make room for new cases. Only Sheriff Hallett kept a photo of Ray and Maya on his desk, though it had begun collecting dust. November brought the first winter storm. Sarah canceled her canyon visits for 2 weeks while the trails were snowed in. When she finally returned, she found her offerings untouched, covered in frost. The silence felt heavier somehow, Christmas came and went. Sarah put up stockings for Ray and Maya, just as she had when they'd planned to move in with her. The presents she'd bought months ago, a new toolkit for Ray, a chemistry set for Maya, sat wrapped in her closet, waiting. In January, the FBI officially classified the case as cold. Agent Wilson called personally to inform Sarah, her voice professional but kind. "We'll keep their names in the database," she promised. "Any new leads will be investigated." Sarah knew what that meant. No more resources, no more searches. Just another file in a drawer somewhere. February brought Sarah's birthday. She spent it at the canyon, reading Maya's favorite book aloud to the wind. A family of hikers passed by, giving her odd looks. She'd gotten used to those. The pitying glances, the whispered conversations. In a small town like Sedona, everyone knew her story. March marked 8 months since the disappearance. Sarah attended a support group for families of missing persons in Phoenix. The stories there were both different and painfully similar. Loved ones vanishing without trace. Investigations going cold. Years passing without answers. She left early, unable to bear the thought of Ray and Maya becoming just another sad tale. April brought spring wildflowers to the canyon. Sarah photographed them, remembering how Maya used to collect bouquets on their hiking trips. She left the pictures at the juniper tree, weighted down with stones against the wind. May saw tourism peak again. New missing persons posters appeared. Different faces, different stories. Sarah helped distribute them, knowing how it felt to need strangers to care. Some shop owners recognized her, offered free coffee or kind words. Others just nodded uncomfortably and turned away. June came with brutal heat. The canyon rocks blazed red-hot by noon. Sarah switched her visits to sunrise, watching shadows retreat from the valleys as day broke. Sometimes she thought she heard motorcycle engines in the distance, but it was always just the wind. July brought the first anniversary. Sarah organized a small memorial at the canyon overlook. A dozen people came, mostly old friends of Ray's from his riding days. A few deputies who'd led the search. Even Helen's sister, who'd never believed the accusations. Sheriff Hallett attended too, standing apart from the group. He looked older, more worn. The case had aged him somehow. When the others left, he lingered. "I've been going over everything," he told Sarah. "Every statement, every photo. Something doesn't fit." "What do you mean?" "The way it all happened. The helmet placed just so. The shoe. It's like..." He shook his head. "Like someone wanted us looking in the wrong direction." Sarah had thought the same thing countless times. "But where should we have looked?" "I don't know." Hallett stared out at the endless canyon. "That's what keeps me up at night." Back at the station that evening, Hallett pulled the Larkin file one last time. The photos were fading, the papers yellowing at the edges. Soon it would join the other cold cases in storage. Boxes of lost souls and unanswered questions. He spread everything across his desk. The initial reports, search grid maps, witness statements. His eyes caught on familiar details. The mysterious truck, the lack of tracks, the carefully placed evidence. Like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit, the sun set behind the red rocks, casting long shadows through his office window. Somewhere out there, the truth was hidden in plain sight. He could feel it. Hallett gathered the papers slowly, tucking them back into their folder. Tomorrow, he'd box it all up. Protocol for cases gone cold. But tonight, he stood at the window, watching darkness claim the desert. "We missed something," he whispered to the gathering night. "God help me, we missed something." The file went into storage the next morning, joining decades of other unsolved mysteries. But Sarah kept her vigil on the canyon rim, and Hallett kept the photo on his desk. Small defiances against time and forgetting. Silent promises to those who had vanished into the vast red wilderness. The desert kept its secrets, and the years began their long march forward. The scene concludes here, having covered the passage of time, Sarah's continued vigil, and Hallett's final moment with the case file, as specified in the prompt. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the Sedona Sheriff's Department on a quiet Tuesday morning in June 2025. Deputy Claire Navarro sorted through parking citations, the monotony broken only by the whir of an ancient desktop fan. Outside, the temperature already pushed 95 degrees before noon. The glass door creaked open, letting in a blast of hot air. Claire looked up, her hand instinctively moving to her hip. A woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright desert sun. She was barefoot, her feet caked with red dust. Her clothes, a faded denim dress and threadbare cardigan, hung loose on her gaunt frame. "Can I help you?" Claire asked, rising from her desk. The woman stepped forward slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. Deep-set eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. Her face was weathered, lined beyond her apparent years. When she spoke, her voice was rough from disuse. "My name is Maya Larkin." She gripped the edge of the front desk. I came from here." Claire froze. That name. She knew that name from the department's cold case files, from the faded missing persons poster that still hung in the break room. Maya Larkin, the 9-year-old who vanished with her father in 1992. "Ma'am, please sit down." Claire pulled out a chair, watching as the woman lowered herself with calculated precision. "I'm going to call someone else in here, okay?" The woman, Maya, nodded once, her eyes fixed on the wall calendar. Detective Sam Rodriguez arrived within minutes, his face tight with controlled urgency. He'd worked the cold case division for 15 years. The Larkin disappearance was legend among Arizona law enforcement. "Ms. Larkin," he said gently, setting a bottle of water in front of her. "Can you tell us where you've been?" She touched the bottle but didn't open it. "Underground," she whispered. "In caves. The desert. It eats time down there." Rodriguez glanced at Claire, then back to Maya. "We're going to need to verify your identity. Would you be willing to give us a DNA sample?" Another small nod. Her fingers traced patterns on the table's surface. Circles within circles. The next hours passed in careful procedure. Photos were taken. Forms filled out. A medical examiner drew blood while Maya sat perfectly still, her eyes closed. They found old scars on her arms, her legs, marking years of untold story. "Someone should call Lydia Gorman," Rodriguez said quietly to Claire. "She's Ray Larkin's sister. Still lives over in Tucson." Claire stepped out to make the call, her hands shaking slightly as she dialed. "How do you tell someone their niece has returned from the dead?" The DNA results came back 2 days later. The woman was indeed Maya Larkin, 42 years old now, though her medical exam suggested years of malnutrition and vitamin D deficiency. Signs of long-term confinement. They set her up in a private room at the Sedona Medical Center. The local media caught wind of the story, and satellite trucks began appearing in the parking lot. Rodriguez stationed officers outside her door. On the third day, Maya began to talk. "There were men," she said, her voice stronger now. "They wore uniforms without names, brown clothes. They said the world was sick, that they were keeping us safe." She paused, counting her breaths. "Dad fought them. He kept saying my name, telling me to remember who I was." Rodriguez recorded everything, while Claire took notes. The fragments came slowly. Memories of stone walls, endless tunnels. Other children who disappeared one by one. Religious teachings about purity and preparation. Punishment for speaking unauthorized words. "Dad?" Maya's voice caught. "He tried to get us out. There was shouting. Then they took him away." She traced her circles again. "He told me to stay quiet, to survive." They brought in Dr. Sarah Chen, a trauma specialist. She helped Maya construct a timeline, piece together the scattered images. A picture emerged of a survivalist cult called the Fold, operating in hidden compounds throughout the Southwest. "They moved us," Maya explained. "When raids came or someone got close. Different caves, different states. They said time didn't matter underground." Claire spent hours in the records room, pulling old files. The fold had surfaced briefly in FBI investigations during the late 90s. A splinter group from a larger organization. They specialized in protecting children from what they called society's corruption. Maya's Aunt Lydia arrived from Tucson. Her face lined with 3 decades of grief now transformed to stunned joy. The reunion was quiet. Just long minutes of held hands and shared tears. "You look so much like him," Lydia whispered. "Like Ray." Maya touched her own face, as if trying to find her father there. Former Sheriff Tom Hallett came out of retirement when he heard the news. He walked with a limp now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Claire watched him stand in the doorway of Maya's room, his badge still hanging on a chain around his neck. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "We looked in the wrong places." Maya studied him for a long moment. "The caves were hidden," she said, "behind false rock walls. They said no one would ever find us." But someone had found her. Or rather, she had found her way out, after a flash flood collapsed part of her last prison. After the last guard died of pneumonia, Maya had walked for 3 days through the desert. Her feet bled. She followed the sun. "I remembered things," she told Claire during a late-night interview. "Street names, the shape of the mountains. Dad used to quiz me about directions on our rides." She smiled faintly. "He said a Larkin should always know their way home." Claire set up a bulletin board in the detective's room, mapping Maya's fragmented revelations. Photos of cave openings in red rock walls, satellite images of possible compound locations, a list of names Maya remembered, other children, guards, leaders who visited wearing clean suits, and speaking of destiny. The investigation expanded. FBI agents arrived. Other cold cases were pulled from storage. Missing children from Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. Several matched Maya's descriptions. But it was the small details that haunted Claire the most. How Maya always faced the door. The way she touched walls to confirm their solidity. Her precise counting of steps, foods, words, measuring out a world made uncertain by darkness. "Time moves differently in caves," Maya explained once, her fingers tracing their endless circles. "Days and nights blur. Years become numbers without meaning. But I kept counting, kept remembering. Dad said that's how you stay yourself. You hold on to your numbers, your name, your memories." The media clamored for interviews. Maya declined them all. Instead, she spent hours with sketch artists, drawing cave layouts and faces from memory. She identified locations on maps, marking places where the desert had swallowed its secrets. "There are others," she told Rodriguez. "Some got out before me. Some didn't make it. But they all had names, families, lives that were stolen." Claire watched Maya grow stronger day by day. The hollow look in her eyes slowly filled with purpose. She ate regular meals, learned to sleep in rooms with windows. But some habits remained. The counting, the circles, the need to know every exit. 1 month after her return, Maya asked to visit the canyon where it all began. Claire drove her there early morning, before the tourists arrived. They stood at the overlook, watching the sun paint the rocks gold and crimson. Maya walked to the old juniper tree, bigger now, but still standing sentinel. She placed her hand on its rough bark. "Dad's motorcycle was here," she said quietly. "They made him park it, made him leave his helmet. They wanted it to look like—" She trailed off, counting her breaths again. "Like we'd just disappeared into the desert." The investigation continued, expanding into multiple states. Maya's testimony opened doors long thought sealed. But that morning, standing in the canyon's vast silence, Claire understood something profound about survival. How it wasn't just about enduring, but about keeping your truth alive in the darkness, counting the days until light returned. Maya turned from the tree, her bare feet steady on the red earth. In the distance, a motorcycle's engine echoed off the canyon walls. She didn't flinch at the sound. "Ready to go?" Claire asked. Maya nodded, taking one last look at the horizon. I remembered the way home, she said. That's what matters now. Dr. Sarah Chen's office at Sedona Medical Center faced east, catching the morning light that painted the walls in warm amber. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor instead of the offered chair, a sketch pad balanced on her knees. Her hands moved in precise, measured strokes. Tell me about what you're drawing, Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but neutral. Maya's pencil traced another line. The walls weren't smooth like these, she said, gesturing to the office. They had ridges, patterns, natural, but not natural. Her fingers smudged the graphite, creating shadows. Some parts were worked by tools. Other parts were older than tools. Claire Navarro watched from her corner seat, noting how Maya's drawings had evolved over the past week. The first ones had been abstract. Circles within circles, spiraling patterns that seemed to follow some internal logic, but now recognizable shapes emerged. Canyon walls, rock formations, what looked like doorways cut into stone. And these symbols? Dr. Chen pointed to recurring marks in the margins, triangles intersecting squares, numbers arranged in grids. They mark the days. Maya's voice dropped. Underground, you can't see the sun. Time feels wrong. These helped us track. She paused, counting under her breath. The desert eats time if you don't hold on to it. Claire noticed how Maya's hand tightened on the pencil at those words. It wasn't the first time she'd used that phrase. The detective had started keeping a log of Maya's repeated statements, looking for patterns. Dr. Chen made a note. You mentioned us. There were others with you? Maya nodded, starting a new sketch. This one showed what appeared to be a series of connected chambers. Children. Different ages. They brought new ones sometimes, took others away. Her pencil hesitated. They said we were being saved from the corruption above. The morning sessions always followed this pattern. Drawing, careful questions, fragments of memory surfacing through art. Dr. Chen had explained how trauma survivors often recalled things in pieces, how pushing too hard could trigger shutdowns. Claire studied the growing collection of sketches pinned to the office wall. Most featured the same general landscape: high canyon walls, hidden entrances, cave systems that seemed to stretch forever. Maya drew them from different angles, adding more detail each time. This area, Maya pointed to a particular formation in her latest sketch, had metal in the walls. Old tracks, support beams. They said it was from before, when men dug for silver. Claire sat up straighter. Mining history. Something concrete they could research. She made a note in her own pad. The session continued as sunlight crept across the floor. Maya filled page after page, her drawings becoming more specific. She marked locations of water sources, ventilation shafts, storage areas. Between sketches, she would stop to trace circles on her palm, a grounding technique Dr. Chen had taught her. The desert eats time, she whispered again, adding another symbol to the margin. But numbers don't lie. 7 steps to the water cistern, 12 to the sleeping room, 23 to the teaching hall. She looked up suddenly. I counted everything. Dad said that's how you keep your mind straight. After the session, Claire spread Maya's sketches across the detective's room bulletin board. Rodriguez stood beside her, comparing them to topographical maps of the Red Rock Wilderness. Look at this. Claire pointed to a recurring formation in Maya's drawings. She keeps showing this distinctive split in the canyon wall. And these marks could be old mining infrastructure. Rodriguez nodded, pulling up historical surveys on his tablet. The whole area's got a mining history going back to the 1880s. Silver mostly, some copper. Most operations shut down by the 1940s. They spent hours cross-referencing Maya's sketches with geological surveys, old trail maps, and mining claims. The area she drew most frequently matched a remote section of canyon that had once housed the Desert Queen mine. Here, Rodriguez traced a faded line on a 1925 survey map. There was an access road, pre-highway system. doesn't show up on modern maps. Claire overlaid Maya's drawings with the survey. The formations aligned. The Fold could have used abandoned mining infrastructure to build their compound, hidden in plain sight. They brought in Wesley Tsosi from the Forest Service, an expert on the area's cave systems. He studied Maya's sketches with professional interest. "These are accurate," he said, pointing to details of rock strata and natural water flow. "Someone who spent time underground drew these, and look, these support structures she's marked. Classic silver mining technique from the early 1900s. Claire added another layer to their investigation board. A timeline of reported cult activity in the Southwest. The Fold had first appeared on law enforcement radar in the late 1980s, splintering off from a larger religious group. They'd gone underground, literally and figuratively, after federal attention increased. Their ideology was all about purity through isolation, Claire explained to the team. They believed society was fatally corrupted, that only children raised in complete separation could survive what was coming. Maya's drawings revealed how they'd made that ideology concrete. Hidden compounds, using natural cave systems expanded by old mining works. A world beneath the world. In her next session with Dr. Chen, Maya worked on a new sketch. This one showing the entrance they'd used that first day. Her hand shook slightly. "There was a truck," she said, adding details to the drawing. "They made Dad park his motorcycle, leave his helmet. Said we had to come see something important." She stopped, counting her breaths. "I knew something was wrong. Dad did too. But they had guns." Dr. Chen kept her voice steady. "What happened then?" "They led us down a trail. Not a real trail. Hidden behind rocks. Dad held my hand so tight." Maya switched to a darker pencil. "The entrance looked natural until they moved something. Then there was a door. Metal. Heavy." She drew it with hard, precise lines. "They said we were chosen. That time wouldn't touch us underground." The desert eats time. The phrase echoed in Claire's mind as she added Maya's new sketch to their growing map of the past. Each drawing brought them closer to understanding where she'd been held, how the compound had operated. Satellite imagery of the target area showed nothing obvious, just red rock and scrub brush. But old mining records confirmed extensive tunnel systems. The Desert Queen's main shaft had reportedly collapsed in 1939, but smaller workings might have remained accessible. The Fold would have needed infrastructure, Rodriguez pointed out during their evening briefing. Power, water, ventilation. They couldn't have operated completely off-grid. Claire nodded, pinning up another of Maya's drawings, this one showing what looked like generator rooms and water storage systems. They adapted what was there, built around it. Maya's sketches show at least 3 levels of development: original mining works, natural cave formations, and their own modifications. They brought in mining engineers to analyze the structural details in Maya's drawings. The experts confirmed that the support systems she depicted were technically feasible. A hidden compound could have operated in the old workings, especially if they'd reinforced and expanded existing tunnels. Maya continued her daily sessions, each drawing adding another piece to the puzzle. She sketched sleeping quarters, teaching rooms, storage areas, an entire underground world mapped from memory. Between sketches, she would recite numbers, measurements, steps between points. "The desert eats time," she repeated, drawing another doorway. "But stone remembers. Stone keeps its shapes." Her pencil moved faster. "I remembered every turn, every chamber. Had to. That's how you stay found when everything else is lost." Claire watched the map of Maya's lost years take shape on their investigation board. Each sketch brought them closer to understanding where she'd been held, how she'd survived, and possibly where they might find evidence of others who had disappeared into the desert's hidden depths. The breakthrough came when Wesley Tsosi identified a probable access point based on Maya's most detailed drawings. An old Forest Service road, abandoned and overgrown, led to within half a mile of the location. Historical photos from the mining era showed the distinctive canyon split Maya had drawn repeatedly. "We need to search that area," Claire told Rodriguez, spreading out the accumulated evidence. "Her sketches are too consistent, too detailed to be imagination." Maya's words echoed in the quiet room. The desert eats time. But perhaps, Claire thought, it also preserved things. In memory, in stone, in drawings that mapped a path back through lost years. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the canyon floor when the search team assembled at the old Forest Service road. Claire watched Maya step carefully from the department SUV, her bare feet dusty despite the boots they'd given her. She'd insisted on coming, though Dr. Chen had advised against it. "I need to show you," Maya had said. Some things can't be drawn. The team included Wesley Tsosi from Forest Service, 2 cave rescue specialists, Rodriguez, and 4 deputies. They carried enough gear for a full day's exploration. Helmets with mounted lights, ropes, first aid supplies, and documentation equipment. Maya stood at the trailhead, eyes closed, fingers moving in their counting pattern. 700 steps from the old gate, she murmured. Past 3 split junipers. Then west, where the rocks make shadows like teeth. They followed her lead, watching her navigate the terrain with uncertainty that seemed both mechanical and instinctive. She counted under her breath, pausing at landmarks that matched her sketches. A lightning-struck pine, a boulder split by tree roots, a dry wash cutting through red stone. Wesley consulted the old mining surveys as they walked. "We are following what would have been the original access trail," he said. "But it's been deliberately obscured. See how the rockfall patterns don't match natural erosion?" Claire noticed it too. Subtle differences in how stones were placed. Paths that seemed to lead nowhere until viewed from specific angles. Someone had worked hard to make this area appear untouched. "Stop," Maya said suddenly. They'd been walking for nearly 2 hours. "Count back from the 3rd juniper. 23 steps west," she pointed to a seemingly solid rock face. "There." The wall looked natural enough, striated sandstone typical of the region. But Wesley's trained eye caught what others missed. "Look at the grain patterns," he said, running his hand along the surface. "They're vertical here, horizontal there. Natural formation would be consistent." He pulled out testing equipment, and the mineral composition changes sharply at this line. The cave rescue team moved forward with sensors, checking for hollow spaces behind the rock face. Their equipment confirmed what Maya already knew. There was something beyond the stone. "It's a false front," the lead technician explained. "Probably concrete and local stone composite, designed to weather naturally." Clever work, would fool most observers. It took them 2 hours to locate the mechanism. Maya watched silently as they cleared decades of debris, revealing a heavy metal frame hidden within the rock. The door, when they finally exposed it, was industrial-grade steel, corrupted by years of moisture but still solid. "Stand back," Rodriguez ordered as they prepared to breach. The rescue team checked air quality while deputies drew weapons. Protocol for entering unknown spaces. The door opened with a groan of protesting metal. Stale air rushed out, carrying the musty scent of long abandonment. Their helmet lights illuminated a concrete tunnel sloping downward, rail tracks still visible beneath years of dust. Maya stayed close to Claire as they entered, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. "They kept the lights dim," she said softly. "Said bright light hurt the truth." The main tunnel opened into a larger chamber after about 50 yards. Here, the mining infrastructure gave way to more recent construction. Concrete floors, metal support beams, electrical conduit running along the walls. Their lights revealed what they'd hoped and dreaded to find. Evidence of long-term human habitation. Metal bed frames lined one wall, their thin mattresses rotted by time and damp. A kitchen area held industrial shelving stocked with decades-old canned goods. A generator room contained rusted equipment and empty fuel drums. Everything spoke of careful planning. of preparation for extended isolation. Documentation team, start your sweep, Rodriguez ordered. Full photo and video coverage. Dr. Chen will want to see everything. Claire watched Maya move through the space with terrible familiarity. She stopped at one of the small beds, touching its frame. Mine was here, she said. By the vent shaft. I could hear wind at night. The search team spread out, calling findings through their radios. Got a classroom set up here. Food storage. Medical supplies. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of the compound's operation. Claire found the first journal in what appeared to be an office area. The leather binding was cracked. Pages, yellowed, but the writing remained legible. Opening to a random page, she read, "The world above grows more corrupt. We are the guardians of purity, keeping these chosen ones safe until the time of cleansing. They must be shaped carefully, minds wiped clean of outside poison." More journals filled a metal cabinet, documenting years of the Fold's activities. Claire bagged them carefully for evidence. On the wall above the desk, a child's drawing remained taped in place. Stick figures standing beneath a black sun. The paper faded to near transparency. "Claire!" Rodriguez's voice echoed from a side tunnel. "We need you here." She found him with Wesley at the entrance to a narrow shaft. Their lights showed where the tunnel had partially collapsed, but something reflected dully in the beam. "There's something metallic," Wesley said, playing his light across the debris. "And other materials." Maya spoke from behind them, making them jump. She'd approached silently. "That's where they took him," she said, after he fought back. Said it would be his grave until the cleansing came. The cave rescue team worked carefully to secure the unstable section. As they cleared debris, the shape became clear, bones wrapped in the remains of a leather jacket. A set of dog tags glinted in the helmet lights. Claire felt her throat tighten. She'd known they might find this, had prepared for it, but the reality still hit hard. Maya stood perfectly still, counting silently on her fingers. 7,312 days, she said finally. I counted every one. For him. Rodriguez supervised as they documented the scene. The jacket, despite its condition, was clearly a biker's cut. Heavy leather with patches still barely visible. The dog tags would confirm what they already knew. They'd found Ray Larkin. The recovery took hours. Every fragment had to be photographed, mapped, collected with precision. Through it all, Maya watched. Her face impossible to read in the artificial light. They found more as they worked. A broken chain that might have been handcuffs. Impact marks on the tunnel walls consistent with a struggle. The story of Ray Larkin's last fight was written in the stone and rust. He tried to get us out, Maya said as they finished, when he realized what they really were, what they planned. She touched the wall near where they'd found him. He got me as far as this tunnel. Then they came. The evidence collection continued throughout the compound. Teams cataloged documents, photographed rooms, mapped the layout. Every discovery added detail to the nightmare. Lesson plans for indoctrinating children. Records of other acquisitions. Supplies meant to last for years underground. As the day wore on, they found more disturbing signs of the compound's true purpose. Hidden rooms suggested punishment areas. Medical logs documented corrections and purification procedures. The Fold had built their own world here, with their own rules and terrible logic. Maya moved through it all like a ghost, touching objects, whispering numbers. She paused longest in what appeared to be a communal area, where faded marks on the wall tracked the heights of growing children. There were others, she said, running her fingers over the measurements. Some died. Some were taken to other places. Some just disappeared into the dark. By late afternoon, the initial survey was complete. They would need many more days to fully document everything. But they had what mattered most. Proof of what had happened here, and Ray Larkin's remains. As they prepared to exit, Maya made one last circuit of the main chamber. She stopped at each bed, each doorway, counting steps between them. When she finished, She turned to Claire. "It's smaller than I remembered," she said. "But the numbers are the same. They're always the same." She looked back into the darkness. "Can we go now? The desert has eaten enough time." The fluorescent lights of the Coconino County Medical Examiner's office hummed steadily as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her glasses, studying the DNA analysis results on her monitor. Claire Navarro stood beside her desk, while Maya sat quietly in a corner chair, her bare feet tucked beneath her. "The mitochondrial DNA is conclusive," Dr. Chen said, turning to face them. "Combined with the dental records and the dog tags recovered at the scene, we can confirm these are the remains of Raymond James Larkin." Maya nodded slowly, her fingers moving in their familiar counting pattern. She'd known, of course, had known since the moment they found the leather jacket in that dark tunnel. But hearing it, stated in clinical terms, made it real in a different way. "The skeletal analysis shows evidence of significant trauma," Dr. Chen continued, pulling up detailed imaging on her screen. "Multiple fractures to the ribs and left arm. Concentrated defensive wounds. He fought hard." Claire watched Maya's face carefully, but the younger woman's expression remained neutral, controlled. Only her fingers moved, counting. Always counting. "There's more," Dr. Chen said, gesturing to another set of images. "The position of the remains and the pattern of injuries suggest he was protecting something, or someone. His body was found curved, arms extended outward, consistent with shielding another person." Maya stood abruptly, walking to the light box where X-rays were displayed. She traced the outline of her father's skull with one finger, not quite touching the film. "He told me to run," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If anything happened, run and don't look back. Keep counting steps until I couldn't count anymore." Claire moved closer, but maintained a respectful distance. "Can you tell us what happened that day, Maya?" Maya's hand dropped to her side. "We were trying to escape. Dad figured out what they really were. Not just survivalists, but something worse. He waited until night shift change, took out the guard. We almost made it to the tunnel." She paused, counting silently to herself before continuing. "There were 4 of them. Dad had a pipe he'd pulled loose. He fought so hard. Kept yelling for me to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave him." Her voice remained steady, but her fingers moved faster. "The last thing he said was, 'I love you, Firefly.'" Then there was a sound like thunder in the tunnel. Dr. Chen pulled up another image. "The fatal injury was here." She indicated a fracture pattern on the skull. "A single, massive impact." Maya nodded. "They dragged me away after. Said he was an example of the sickness they were protecting us from. Made us write it in our journals every day for a week. The outsider refused rebirth." Claire retrieved an evidence bag containing one of the recovered journals. The entry Maya had mentioned was there, dated August 15, 1992, written in different childish hands. "The outsider refused rebirth. His corruption endangered us all. We are thankful for the guardians who keep us pure." "They made all of us write it," Maya said. "Me, Sarah, Tommy, Lisa." She stopped suddenly, as if catching herself. Claire's attention sharpened. "There were other children there?" Maya returned to her chair, tucking her feet under her again. "Always others. Some were there before me, some came after. They moved us between compounds sometimes, never told us where. Called it redistribution of the pure." Claire spread out more evidence photos on Dr. Chen's desk. Ledgers and records recovered from the compound. Pages of names, dates, locations. Some entries were coded, but patterns emerged. "Child brought in with the storm," Claire read. "That's you, Maya. August 1992. There are others. Vessel 23, acquired Phoenix area. Vessel Centene, Flagstaff retrieval." Maya leaned forward, scanning the entries. Her finger stopped on one line. Sarah Henderson, she said softly. She was there with me. They took her somewhere else in '94. Said she needed deeper cleansing. Claire quickly cross-referenced the name against missing persons records on her tablet. Sarah Henderson, age 7, disappeared from a Phoenix shopping mall. March 1991. Never found. They spent the next hour matching names from the ledgers to missing children reports across Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Some cases were still open. Some had gone cold decades ago. Each entry represented another family destroyed, another child lost to the fold's twisted vision. Tommy died in '95, Maya said, pointing to another name. Pneumonia, I think. They wouldn't get real doctors, said medicine was poison. Her finger moved to another entry. Lisa tried to run in '97. They brought her back. I never saw her again after that. Claire documented each name, each fate. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Dozens of children taken over years, moved between hidden compounds like pieces on a chessboard. Maya's survival seemed more miraculous with each new revelation. Do you remember any other locations? Claire asked gently. Anything that might help us find these places? Maya closed her eyes, her fingers moving in complex patterns. Red rocks, always red rocks, but different shapes, different heights. One place had a view of train tracks far below. Another was near some kind of factory. We could smell chemicals sometimes. She opened her eyes, looking directly at Claire for the first time that day. I think I'm the only one who made it out. The only one who came back. Dr. Chen carefully placed Ray Larkin's dog tags in an evidence bag. They would be returned to Maya once the investigation was complete. Your father's sacrifice gave you the strength to survive, she said quietly. He protected you until the end. Maya took the bag, running her fingers over the raised letters through the plastic. He used to tell me stories about Vietnam, she said. Said sometimes survival means carrying the weight of those who didn't make it. Said the ones who make it back have a duty to remember. Claire gathered the ledgers and photos, knowing each page would launch new investigations, reopen old wounds, perhaps bring answers to families who'd waited decades. We'll find out what happened to the others, she promised. We'll make sure they're remembered. Maya nodded, still holding the dog tags. Dad always said truth was like sunrise. It comes slow, but it can't be stopped. She looked up at the fluorescent lights, then back to Claire. I counted every day in the dark. Now I'll count the days until we know everything. Chen began carefully packing Ray's remains for transfer to the funeral home Maya's aunt had selected. Each bone was wrapped with precision, placed gently in lined boxes. The leather jacket, preserved as evidence but too fragile to restore, was photographed one final time. Maya watched the process silently, her fingers moving in their familiar patterns. Through the office window, the red rocks of Sedona caught the afternoon sun, glowing like hot iron. Somewhere in those stone towers, other compounds might still hide their secrets. Other children's stories waited in the dark. But today, at least, one truth had emerged into the light. Ray Larkin could finally rest. His sacrifice documented. His protection of his daughter proven in bone and stone. The weight of remembering would pass to Maya now, counting not just for herself anymore, but for all those who never made it back from the desert's timeless dark. The Phoenix FBI field office hummed with activity as Claire spread photographs across the conference table. Each image showed the same man from different angles and eras. A lean figure with piercing blue eyes and a shaved head. A serpentine tattoo coiling down his neck. Elias Cree, Claire addressed the assembled task force. Former Methodist minister from Tulsa, disappeared in '85 after allegations of inappropriate conduct with youth group members. Resurfaced in Arizona, leading what he called the Pure Path, later known as The Fold. Agent Marcus Torres clicked through digital surveillance photos on the wall screen. These are from '92 to '97. Notice how he ages, gets gaunter, more intense. Classic Messiah complex progression. Maya sat quietly in the corner, hands folded in her lap. She'd insisted on being present, though Claire had worried it might be too much. But Maya's therapist had agreed. Facing the truth was part of healing. He said he could hear God in the desert wind. Maya spoke suddenly, making several agents turn. Said modern society was poison, and only children could be truly purified. He'd walk through the compounds at night, singing hymns. We were supposed to join in, no matter how tired we were. Claire nodded encouragingly. What else do you remember about him? He never raised his voice. That's what made him scarier. He'd speak softer when he was angry, like a whisper. Said God gave him visions of which children needed saving. Maya's fingers traced patterns on the table. He had a way of looking at you like he could see inside your head. Torres pulled up a map marked with red pins. We've identified 12 possible compound locations based on Maya's descriptions and survivor accounts. 3 in Arizona, 4 in Utah, 2 in Nevada, 3 in New Mexico. All remote, all near geological features that could hide entrances. All connected to shell companies owned by former Fold members. Claire spread out more photos. Driver's licenses, passport photos, surveillance stills. These are known associates. Many were professionals before joining. Doctors, lawyers, teachers. Some had criminal records. Others were completely clean. The common thread was Cree's influence. He knew how to read people, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A woman in her 50s stood there, straight-backed despite obvious tension. Sarah Henderson, she introduced herself. I was there with Maya, in the Red Rock compound. Maya stood slowly, recognition dawning. Sarah? The women studied each other. Survivors separated by decades, connected by shared darkness. Sarah's hands showed the same counting patterns as Maya's. I got out in '99, Sarah said, taking a seat. After the main raid. Spent years in therapy, changed my name, tried to forget. Then I saw Maya's story on the news. She looked at the photos of Cree. He's still alive. I saw him in 2015. The room stilled. Claire leaned forward. Where? Santa Fe Farmers Market. Just a glimpse. Different name on his name tag. He was selling honey. But those eyes... Sarah shuddered. I'd never forget those eyes. He recognized me too. Smiled and disappeared into the crowd. Torres made notes while Claire pulled up more files. We've had similar reports. Montana, Oregon, even Mexico. Nothing confirmed. But the pattern suggests he's still active, just deeper underground. The compounds weren't just isolated locations, Maya added. They were like spokes in a wheel. We'd be moved between them, never knowing where exactly. Different children, different teachers, but always his rules. Sarah nodded. The Fold wasn't just a cult. It was a network. Money came from somewhere. New children kept arriving. Someone had to be helping from the outside. Claire projected a complex diagram on the screen. We've traced financial connections through multiple fake charities and religious organizations. Property purchases, shell companies, even private schools registered as religious institutions. All designed to look legitimate. Some families gave their children voluntarily, Sarah said quietly. Believed his promises of spiritual protection. Others, like Maya and me, were taken. But once inside, it didn't matter how you got there. Everyone belonged to him. Maya's Aunt Lydia arrived with lunch, setting up sandwiches and drinks in the corner. She'd become a constant presence, protective but not smothering, understanding Maya's need to face this process. As they ate, more survivors arrived, each drawn by Maya's story, each carrying pieces of the puzzle. Thomas Chen, taken from a Las Vegas playground in '90. Rebecca Martinez, whose parents had given her to the Fold as a spiritual tithe in 1993. Michael Watson, who'd escaped during the '97 raid but had never spoken publicly until now. They built a timeline on the wall. Cree's early years as a charismatic youth minister, his gradual shift toward extremism, the formation of the Pure Path, its evolution into the Fold, the expanding network of compounds and supporters. He was careful about records, Torres noted. These ledgers from Maya's compound are our first real documentation. Everything else was destroyed or hidden during the raid. He kept it all in his head, Rebecca explained. Said writing things down was a modern weakness. But he never forgot a detail. Could recite every child's background, every follower's history, every compound's supply needs. Claire turned to Maya. We'd like you to speak publicly. Put a face to this investigation. It might bring more survivors forward. Maybe help us finally track him down. Maya was quiet for a long moment, counting under her breath. Finally, she looked up. Will it help find the others? The ones still missing? It might, Claire said honestly. At minimum, it gives their families answers. Lets them know they weren't crazy, weren't wrong to keep hoping. Sarah reached over, touched Maya's hand. You don't have to do it alone. We'll stand with you. One by one, the other survivors nodded. Maya looked at their faces, each marked by the same shadows she carried, each finding strength in breaking silence. Okay, she said, but I want to tell everything. Not just about him, but about the children, about my father, about how the desert doesn't just eat time, it eats truth, unless we bring it into the light. Claire began organizing the press conference while Torres coordinated, with other field offices. Maya worked with a victim advocate to prepare her statement, supported by Sarah and the others who'd come forward. They gathered photos of the missing, creating a wall of faces, some from before their disappearances, others age progressed. Maya recognized several, adding details about when she'd last seen them, which compounds they'd been in. It's like a map, she said, studying the faces. A map of everything he stole. Thomas Chen pointed to one photo. Jamie Woodward. He was with me in the Utah compound in '95. Good at drawing. Used to sketch the desert through the air vents. Lisa Reeves, Rebecca added, indicating another. She tried to run away. They caught her 3 days later. One by one, they filled in details, giving shape to the darkness. Each story added weight to the investigation, building a case that stretched across decades and state lines. Maya stood before the wall of faces, her father's dog tags around her neck. Tomorrow she would speak to cameras, tell her story to the world. But tonight, she counted names instead of steps, mapping the distance between lost and found. Sarah joined her, their shoulders touching slightly. He used to say the desert keeps secrets, she murmured. But he forgot. The desert also preserves things. Bones, memories, truth. Maya nodded, fingers moving in their familiar patterns. Outside the FBI building, the Arizona sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in that vast landscape, other compounds might still hide their secrets. Other survivors might still count their days in darkness. But here, in this room full of maps and faces and shared memories, the silence was finally breaking. Tomorrow, Maya would add her voice to the growing chorus of truth, not just for herself, but for all those still waiting to be found. The federal courthouse in Phoenix hummed with anticipation. Television vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the morning sky like mechanical flowers. Inside Conference Room A, Maya sat at a long table, hands folded precisely in her lap, counting breaths to steady herself. Claire Navarro stood by the window, watching reporters file into the press gallery. You don't have to do this all at once, she reminded Maya. We can break it into smaller sessions. No, Maya said quietly. They need to hear it whole, like pulling off a bandage. Sarah Henderson sat beside her, along with 3 other survivors who'd come forward. They formed a protective line, their presence both shield and support. Behind them, family members of the missing filled several rows, parents who'd spent decades wondering, siblings who'd grown up with empty chairs at dinner tables. The task force members entered, representatives from the FBI, state police agencies, and county sheriff's departments across 4 states. They carried tablets and notebooks, ready to cross-reference Maya's testimony against cold case files, spanning 30 years. Maya's Aunt Lydia slipped into a seat near the front, nodding encouragement. She'd brought the leather jacket Ray had died in, cleaned and restored, draped over the chair beside her like a silent witness. At precisely 9 a.m., the cameras went live. Maya looked directly into them, her voice steady despite the slight movement of her fingers, always counting. My name is Maya Larkin. On July 15, 1992, I disappeared with my father from a trail near Sedona, Arizona. I was 9 years old. This is what happened next. She described the pickup truck that had followed them, the men who emerged at the isolated turnoff, the way her father had tried to shield her. They had guns, but they didn't need them. They said they'd kill me if he fought. So he didn't. That was his first sacrifice. The room was absolutely silent as Maya recounted being taken to the hidden compound. The entrance looked like natural rock. Inside, it was like a bunker. Metal beds, storage rooms, classroom spaces. They called it purification through isolation. Children were separated by age, given new names, new histories. She detailed the daily routines. Dawn prayers, lessons mixed with indoctrination, physical labor disguised as spiritual cleansing. Elias Cree visited each compound on rotation. He'd quiz us on doctrine, check our progress. Those who pleased him got privileges. Those who didn't. Her hands tightened briefly. My father was kept separately. They tried to break him, to make him join. He refused. But they let him see me sometimes, to prove I was alive. He'd count my fingers and toes, checking I was whole. That's where I learned to count. It became my way of holding on to him. Maya described the night everything changed. Dad had discovered they were planning to move me to another compound. He tried to get us out. Her voice caught slightly. We almost made it. He got me through the tunnel to the vertical shaft. But they caught up. He held them off while telling me to climb. I heard the gunshots as I reached the top. Several task force members were typing rapidly, correlating her account with evidence from the recently discovered remains. Maya continued, describing years of movement between compounds, the gradual understanding that she wasn't alone. There were others, dozens over the years. Some died, some disappeared to other locations. After the 97 raid, everything became more scattered, more secretive. The compound where I ended up was forgotten even by them. When the flash flood hit in 2009, no one came to check. I survived on stored supplies, trapped but alive. She explained how she'd finally escaped after the last guard's death, walking through the desert until she found civilization. I didn't know how long I'd been gone. Time meant nothing in the dark. The questions began. Specific dates, locations, names. Maya answered with careful precision, each detail triggering new connections in the cold case files. Investigators pulled up maps, comparing her descriptions with satellite imagery and land records. During a brief break, Claire supervised as evidence techs added markers to a large regional map. Red pins showed confirmed compound locations. Yellow marked suspected sites. Blue indicated reported sightings of Cree. The pattern spread like a web across the southwest. Maya's mother arrived during the afternoon session. She sat in the back, thin and gray-haired, hands shaking slightly. Maya acknowledged her presence with a slight nod, but kept her focus on the task force. The fold wasn't just a cult, she explained. It was a business. Children were assets. Some bought, some taken, all isolated from the world until they believed in Cree's version of reality. The compounds generated income through shell companies, legitimate-seeming charities, private schools registered as religious institutions. She detailed the network of supporters. Doctors who provided medical care without records, lawyers who created false paperwork, teachers who maintained the facade of educational programs. Everyone had a role. Everyone was complicit. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Maya turned to address the families directly. I know you've waited years for answers. I can tell you this. Your children didn't vanish into nothing. They existed. They were held in places built to hide them. Some may still be out there, in compounds we haven't found yet. Don't stop looking. The task force chairman announced they would reconvene tomorrow. As the room began to clear, Maya's mother approached hesitantly. They faced each other, daughter and mother, separated by choices made decades ago. I didn't know, her mother whispered. About the compounds, about what they really did. I thought they were just a spiritual community. Maya studied her for a long moment. Did you know they were following us that day? Her mother's silence was answer enough. I don't need your apology, Maya said quietly. But those families back there? They deserve to know if you have any information that might help find their children. She turned away, leaving her mother standing alone with that choice. Claire met Maya at the door, holding a thick file stamped with red letters. I'm officially closing your father's case, she said. Cause of death, protecting his child. Final status, solved by survival. Maya touched the file gently. He never stopped being my father. Even when they forced me to take a new name, I could count on that. Outside, the desert wind carried the scent of sage and creosote. Maya stood for a moment, feeling the last light of day on her face. Tomorrow there would be more questions, more connections to uncover. But tonight, she had spoken her truth. Not just for herself, but for all those still waiting in darkness. Sarah appeared beside her, car keys in hand. Ready? Maya nodded, fingers moving in their familiar pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting steps toward home. The autumn wind carried the scent of juniper and dust across the canyon rim as Maya pulled her truck onto the gravel turnout. Oak Creek Canyon stretched below, a maze of red stone and shadow in the late afternoon light. She sat for a moment, engine idling, watching dust motes dance in the slanting sunbeams through her windshield. The overlook hadn't changed much in 33 years. The same wooden sign marked the trailhead, weather-beaten but still standing. The same twisted juniper tree grew from a crack in the rocks, its branches reaching toward the sky like gnarled fingers. Even the view seemed frozen in time. Ancient stone walls painted in stripes of ochre and crimson, falling away into purple shadows. Maya switched off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy, broken only by the whisper of wind through the canyon and the soft tick of her cooling engine. She reached for the passenger seat where a new motorcycle helmet sat, glossy black with subtle red pinstriping, identical to the one they'd found beneath the juniper tree all those years ago. The memorial stone stood near the canyon edge, a simple granite marker set in concrete. Maya had helped choose its location last week, after the funeral. Now she walked toward it, her boots crunching on gravel, then falling silent on the packed earth of the trail. Detective Claire Navarro had offered to come with her today, but Maya had declined. This moment needed to be hers alone. Still, she found herself counting her steps as she walked. An old habit, a rhythm of survival that had become as natural as breathing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The late afternoon sun caught the polished face of the granite, making the engraved letters shine. Ray Larkin, 1954. 1992. Father Protector, Hero. Love endures beyond darkness. Maya traced the letters with her fingertips, feeling the sharp edges cut into smooth stone. They'd debated the wording for days. Aunt Lydia wanting something longer, more descriptive. But Maya had insisted on simplicity. Her father had never needed many words to show his love. She set the helmet down beside the stone, adjusting it until it sat just right. The sun caught the visor, sending a flash of light across the canyon wall. For a moment, she was 9 years old again, watching her father adjust his helmet before their last ride. Remember, Maya girl, he'd said. Always check your gear twice. Once for safety, once for luck. The memory was so clear it made her chest ache. They'd stopped at that little diner just down the road. The building was abandoned now, its windows boarded up, but she could still taste those French fries, still hear her father's laugh as she tried to steal his milkshake. She hadn't known then that they were being watched, hadn't noticed the pickup truck that would follow them to this very spot, hadn't understood why her father's shoulders had suddenly tensed as they pulled into this turnout, or why his last words to her had been, "Stay behind me." Maya sat down beside the memorial stone, letting her legs dangle over the edge of the overlook. Far below, Oak Creek wound through the canyon like a silver thread. A red-tailed hawk circled on the thermals, its cry echoing off the stone walls. "They found all your journals," she said quietly to the stone. "In that little space, you managed to hide in the compound. Claire showed them to me last week. Every entry, every day you could manage to write. You never stopped trying to find a way out." The wind stirred her hair, carrying the sweet, sharp scent of desert sage. "You documented everything. Guard rotations, tunnel layouts, weak points in their security. You even drew maps on the inside of your jacket lining just in case." She smiled faintly. "They never found those. The leather was too deteriorated by the time they recovered. By the time they found you." A pair of ravens glided past, their wings catching the light. "You knew they were going to separate us. That's why you tried that night, even though the odds—" Her voice caught. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I heard the shots when I was halfway up the shaft. I wanted to go back, but I remembered what you said. Keep climbing, Maya girl. No matter what you hear, keep climbing." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The sun was lower now, painting the canyon walls in deeper shades of red and purple. "I did what you said. I climbed, but they were waiting at the top." Her fingers moved automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "They took me to another compound that night, deeper in the desert, underground. They tried to make me forget you." Maya reached out, touching the helmet's smooth surface. "But I never did. I counted everything, just like you taught me. Steps between rooms, days between visits from Cree, years until I might be old enough to run. You were in every number." A cool shadow crept across the canyon as the sun sank toward the horizon. Soon, the first stars would appear, the same stars that had wheeled overhead while she was hidden beneath the earth. "When I finally got out, when that flash flood collapsed part of the compound and the last guard died, I wasn't sure what year it was. The world had changed so much. But this place," she gestured at the canyon, "this is exactly the same. These rocks held our secret all this time." She stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans. The helmet gleamed in the fading light, a shadow of memory made solid again. "They said you died protecting me." Maya's voice was barely a whisper now. "The evidence showed you fought them, kept them from following me up the shaft. You bought me time, even though you knew." She touched the memorial stone one last time, feeling its warmth from the day's sun. "You never let me go, Dad. Not really. Even in the darkest places, I had your voice in my head, your strength in my heart." She smiled. Through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You kept your promise. You kept me safe until I could save myself." The sun touched the western rim of the canyon, sending long shadows reaching across the valley. Maya stepped back from the edge, her father's old leather jacket creaking softly as she moved. She'd had it restored after they recovered it, the leather cleaned and conditioned. It still smelled faintly of motorcycle oil and desert dust. The helmet stood guard beside the stone, a sentinel against forgetting. From this angle, with the light falling just so, it almost looked like a seated figure, keeping watch over the canyon that had held its secrets for so long. Maya turned toward her truck, each step measured and counted out of habit. Behind her, the winding trail disappeared into deepening shadow, the same path that had swallowed them whole on that July evening 33 years ago. But its power was gone now. The truth had been named, the lost had been found, and love had endured beyond the darkness. The sun slipped behind the canyon rim, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Maya started her truck, the headlights catching the memorial stone in their beams for just a moment before she turned toward home, leaving the helmet to stand its eternal vigil beside the man who had given everything to keep his promise. The morning sun cast long shadows across the conference room at the Sedona Sheriff's Department as Maya Larkin arranged her notes on the podium. Before her, faces both hopeful and haunted filled every seat. Families of the missing, gathered from across 3 states. Detective Claire Navarro stood at the back, arms crossed, watching Maya with quiet pride. "My name is Maya Larkin," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of 30 pairs of eyes. 33 years ago, I disappeared from these canyons with my father. 3 months ago, I walked out of the desert and came home. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maya's fingers found their familiar rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, before continuing. "I'm here because there are things about survival that nobody tells you, things that don't fit into the neat boxes of recovery stories or true crime documentaries." She gestured to the map of the Southwest projected behind her, red pins marking known compound locations. "The truth is messier. It lives in the spaces between hope and acceptance, between holding on and letting go." In the second row, a woman clutched a faded photograph of a teenage boy. Maya met her eyes, recognizing the desperate need for answers. When someone vanishes, we create stories to fill the void. We imagine dramatic escapes or tragic endings because the unknown is unbearable. Maya touched the scar on her wrist, barely visible beneath her sleeve. But survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as counting steps in the dark, as simple as remembering your name when they try to take it from you. Detective Navarro watched as Maya moved from behind the podium, her movements deliberate but unafraid. The woman who had walked barefoot into the station 3 months ago was gone. In her place stood someone who had turned her wounds into wisdom. "The fold took children because we were easier to reshape," Maya continued. "They buried us in man-made caves and underground bunkers, teaching us that the world above was poison, but they didn't understand that memory is stronger than indoctrination, that love leaves marks too deep to erase." She clicked to the next slide, a thermal imaging scan of the compound where she'd been found. "These hidden places exist all around us. They're tucked into canyon walls, disguised as abandoned mines, or hidden beneath legitimate religious retreats. But they leave traces, strange supply deliveries, unusual patterns of movement, children's voices where there shouldn't be any." A man in the back raised his hand. How did you keep going? All those years?" Maya's fingers found their rhythm again. "I counted everything. Steps between rooms, breaths in the dark, stories my father told me. The cult tried to make us forget who we were, but numbers don't lie. They became my truth when everything else was uncertain." She moved to a table covered with evidence photos, children's drawings, journal entries, maps sketched on scraps of paper. "Survivors leave clues, even when we can't speak openly. These weren't just artwork. They were messages, coordinates hidden in doodles, locations coded into seemingly random numbers." Detective Navarro stepped forward, adding her expertise to Maya's testimony. "We've already identified 3 new locations based on materials recovered from the compound. 2 more children have been found alive in the past month alone." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered across tired faces. "But I'm not here just to give you hope," Maya said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm here to give you tools, to teach you what to look for, to help you understand that survival doesn't always look like we expect it to." For the next hour, Maya and Detective Navarro laid out patterns they'd discovered. Supply routes, communication methods, signs of underground construction. They explained how the Fold had exploited remote locations and local assumptions about religious freedom to hide their operations. "The desert doesn't just bury secrets," Detective Navarro explained, pointing to satellite imagery. "It preserves them. Every disturbed patch of earth, every unusual water source, every track that doesn't quite make sense. They all tell a story. We just have to learn how to read it. Maya nodded, touching the worn leather of her father's jacket. The man who took me, Elias Cree, used to say the desert eats time. He meant it as a threat, but he was wrong. The desert doesn't eat time. It holds it. Like layers in rock, everything that happens here leaves a mark. The afternoon sun had shifted to cast red gold light through the windows when Maya opened the floor for questions. Hands rose tentatively at first, then with growing urgency. How do we keep hoping? What signs did we miss? Is it really possible after so many years? Maya answered each question with careful honesty, never promising miracles but offering something more valuable: understanding. She explained how survival could look like compliance, how memory could hide beneath layers of conditioning, how hope could take the shape of tiny acts of rebellion. The hardest truth, she said, is that coming back isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a different one. Recovery isn't linear. Some days I still count my steps. Some nights I still wake up thinking I'm underground. But these aren't weaknesses. They're proof that we carry our whole story with us, even the parts that hurt. Detective Navarro watched as Maya connected with each person individually after the presentation, sharing her contact information, looking at photos, listening to stories. The detective had seen enough cases to know that many of these families would never get the answers they sought. But Maya was giving them something else, a framework for understanding, a way to hold both hope and grief without breaking. Later, as they packed up the presentation materials, Navarro found Maya standing at the window, watching the sunset paint the red rocks. "You're changing how we approach these cases," the detective said quietly. "Not just here, but across the country. Your testimony before Congress last month is already affecting policy." Maya's reflection smiled faintly in the glass. "I'm just making good on a promise. When I was in those caves, I swore that if I ever got out, I'd make sure no one was forgotten, that every missing person would have someone looking for them who understood what to look for." "You're doing more than that," Navarro insisted. "You're dismantling the myths that keep us from seeing the truth. About survival, about recovery, about how people hold on when everything is taken from them." Maya turned from the window, her eyes clear and steady. "The desert taught me something important, Claire. Silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it means patience. Sometimes it means waiting for the right moment to speak." She gathered her father's jacket from the back of a chair, shrugging it on with practiced ease. "I'm going to walk the canyon rim before heading home. Would you like to join me?" Navarro shook her head, understanding Maya's need for solitude. "Another time. I've got reports to file. 3 more possible locations identified from today's session alone." The parking lot was empty, except for Maya's truck when she emerged from the building. The air had cooled, carrying the sharp scent of sage and juniper. She drove the familiar road to the overlook, parking where her father's motorcycle had been found so many years ago. The trail stretched before her, winding along the canyon rim. Maya walked slowly, deliberately, her boots raising small clouds of red dust. She didn't need to count steps here anymore, but she did anyway. Not from fear, but from choice. Each number was a reminder of how far she'd come. The red rocks towered around her, ancient and indifferent. They had seen everything: her father's last stand, her own desperate flight, the years of searching, and finally, her return. They had held her story safe until she was ready to tell it. A raven called overhead, its voice echoing off the canyon walls. Maya stopped at a viewpoint, looking out over the vast landscape that had both imprisoned and freed her. The desert stretched to the horizon, its secrets written in stone and shadow. She wasn't a victim anymore, walking these trails. She was a translator, teaching others to read the language of survival. A guide helping to light the way back for those still lost in their own darkness. The sun touched the western rim, and the desert fell quiet. Not with the silence of secrets, but with the peace of truth finally spoken. Maya stood at the edge of the canyon, her father's jacket warm around her shoulders, feeling the land listen to her story at last.